Welcome back to Face the State. I'm Ariana Bennett. Thank you for staying with us. Well, when someone becomes the victim of a crime, there are a lot of services available to help, and most of them are free. But many people don't know where to turn or the right way to handle it if a loved one becomes a victim. Now, Lori Freilich from the Victim Services Unit at the Reno Police Department is here with some tips for us. Lori, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so to start, maybe just tell us, what your unit does.
Yeah, our unit is one that people don't really know we exist until they need us, unfortunately. We are a civilian unit within the Reno Police Department, and we have a team of specially trained advocates, and we work with all crime victim populations. So we work from everything from a homicide case to child abuse to gang violence to elder abuse, drunk driving, injury, death cases, you name it, just across the board, anybody, harassment, stalking. And our advocates are there to provide services and meet the needs of those victims, kind of parallel to the investigation happening. So it's really crisis intervention based, where we are called in either immediately because we're on call, or shortly after a crime has occurred. We're making contact with those families and trying to find out what their primary concerns are at that moment and how we can help fulfill some of those.
Now, what do you find victims typically need right after a crime?
It's a great question that you asked that, because one of the things I think it's taken the criminal justice system a long time to figure out, we had grassroots advocates for years in nonprofits. And once the criminal justice system started realizing the value of having the assistance during criminal justice proceedings, they realized the cooperation rate and participation rate of victims went through the roof, because if people's needs aren't being met, basic needs like their power is going to be shut off, they're going to be homeless, maybe due to the crime, due to the breadwinner in the family being the suspect and being, in jail, all sorts of challenges. They need to keep food on the table. They need to take care of their children. So some of their basic needs aren't being met. They're not likely to be able to participate with an investigation and show up for proceedings. So sometimes it's the biggest ones for us, the most critical, are safety. Depending on the type of crime, ongoing safety concerns in mostly domestic violence type crimes, sexual assault cases where they're no longer safe in their home, they don't have the means to relocate. Those are the issues that are most challenging and that we try, really hard to get handled immediately.
And I know this is something we discussed earlier, but the simple act of just acknowledging that their story is real, believing what they're saying, is a huge help toward their recovery process, right?
Absolutely. We have a philosophy, and it's really just treating everybody with dignity and respect, regardless of issues that they're going through, challenges in their life. And what I mean by that is nobody's perfect. None of us have perfect families, and people that are victimized often are very vulnerable due to other challenges they're going through, such as substance abuse, mental health, homelessness. We have victims from all walks of life. And so we just really try to do a no judgment based delivery in terms of no blame, no judgment, validate what has happened to them. Just because they have those challenges in their life maybe, or they've done something that they view as wrong or caused it, we're always there to share with them that this is not your fault. We want the responsibility of the crime to be on the perpetrators. And so really starting out with building rapport and trust with that type of approach is really successful. Once they hear that we're on their side and we're there to help them, regardless of their level of cooperation or participation in the system either. It's not contingent on them doing what the police need them to do or the prosecutors. We're there to provide services, and ultimately that ends up being the result, though.
Right. Now, if a victim is uncomfortable coming to the police with what happened to them, they're a victim of a crime, and for whatever reason they're uncomfortable, are there other resources? I know there are other nonprofits in our area. Can they provide similar services?
Absolutely. We work really well, I feel like, in Northern Nevada. We collaborate a lot with our nonprofit agencies and our other criminal justice agencies. And one of the things at our unit, we do not require them to have a police case for us to serve them. We meet with victims often that maybe don't know if they want to report, and they just want to know what their options are, so we can do that with them privately and lay them all out, take away some of their concerns and fears, and then they can decide what they want to do. But we also make a lot of referrals to the Committee to Aid Abused Women, Safe Embrace, domestic violence programs, and then we have our sexual assault support services through the Crisis Call Center. They do wonderful things. They all run support groups, and they have advocacy and amazing individuals that work there as well. We work closely with Awaken also for victims that are in the sex industry, and they are fantastic as well. So we try, and I don't want to leave anybody out, but we have many nonprofit partners and agencies that we can provide referrals to until they're ready, or they may never be ready. The important thing is getting them the help that they need and that they deserve. Right.
That kind of leads me into my next question. I was going to ask, we hear all the time with a lot of victims of especially sexual assault crimes, but probably domestic abuse also, there's a lot of shame and self-blame involved that might prevent them from coming forward. Do you have a message for people who are dealing with something like this, who are thinking, I just am not comfortable talking about it, I don't want to come forward? Do you encourage them to come forward as soon as possible?
To me, it's every individual's choice. Like we don't advise, we guide and we provide information and options, but I feel like everybody's story and everybody's experience is their own, and they're the only ones that have the right to make the choice as to when to report, if to report, and who to report to or who to tell. So I can't say that I advise to do this or that. However, what my message would be to people out there that maybe have not told anyone or reported or gotten help because they're afraid, or they're afraid of being believed, or they're afraid of how they would be treated, or they're afraid of people finding out, and they're afraid of like the confidence, that there are people out there and maybe they just didn't know where to turn. So if that's something that they've struggled with, or they want to reach out for services, it can be anything at any level they're comfortable with. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, like once they start the ball rolling, there's a police report and the case is going to be like out of their hands. They can come forward anonymously and receive services and treatment for a sexual assault, let's say, domestic violence. They can receive advocacy, safety planning. They can receive a lot of services without ever law enforcement being involved, if that's what they choose.
Yeah, good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, for the loved ones, for family members and friends who, say someone you love is victimized, what's the best way to handle them? What's the best way to support them? I'm sure there are a lot of mistakes that people make without realizing it.
Absolutely. And I really believe that it's usually with really good intentions, because, you think a lot of things and then it comes out of your mouth and you're like, oh, why did I say that? And I would say that's probably the biggest one, is they ask why questions. And let's say sexual assault, domestic violence are our highest volume cases overall related, to those. And one of the things we hear a lot from survivors are that family members blame them or asked questions that made them feel that they were blaming them. Why did you, stay out that late? Were you dressed that way? Why did you go places? And it sounds very cliche, but those things really are asked of survivors. They blame them for drinking too much. They blame them for putting themselves in those situations. And there is nobody that feels worse about being in that situation than that survivor. We don't need, to shame them or blame them anymore. So I'd say for family members and support systems or friends out there, is just do a lot of listening. If you don't know what to say, don't try to be giving advice or blaming them or guilting them. We see a lot of family members, really guilt people into reporting. If you don't report this, they're going to do it to somebody else and it'll be on your shoulders. Can you live with yourself? Those are really things I would strongly advise to stay away from. Just again, the support, listening, validation, and offering options and resources, and let them be ready when they're ready. The majority of sexual assault cases are delayed report like 5 to 11 days later. That is standard, that is normal, because the trauma and just the decision is so challenging that it takes them time. And so if you're the person they're turning to, just remember that you're not walking in their shoes, and it is scary.
Okay, all right, all good information. I want to touch quickly on what victims' rights are in Nevada, and then how they're changing. So I know Marcy's Law has been in the news. It initially passed in the last legislative session. It's going to have to pass a few more times before it becomes law in Nevada. But what are the rights, and what kind of needs to change, I guess?
Yeah, so in 1983, we had some laws passed in Nevada that provided certain rights to victims. I think there's 8 right now that are within a statute in Nevada. And those rights are some basic rights, like you have the right to be notified upon an offender's release. You have the right to a safe, secure, separate waiting area if you go to court proceedings. Some very basic, you have the right to be heard at sentencing. You have the right to know the status of your case. So very basic rights. And that's been in place since 1983. What Marcy's Law, and I'm not speaking on behalf of Marcy's Law, but we do have an initiative. Barry Duncan is the director of the Marcy's Law Initiative in Nevada. There's a website that has a great a ton of information on it. What it would do is it would actually make it a constitutional amendment in the Nevada Constitution, and it would really expand those rights to make a much more comprehensive list in those rights. So that's why it has to pass 2 legislative sessions, because it's an actual amendment to our Constitution. So it's just really, I think, putting more teeth in things. It's providing a lot more specific rights in terms of the way they need to be treated with respect and dignity, and it goes into a lot more detail. It has the initial 8 rights that we have now, but it goes in and expands them greatly.
Okay, great. Well, we just have about a minute left, so not a lot of time, but is there any service that volunteers you're looking for could provide, or do you need funding for specific programs?
Yeah, well, we do have a volunteer victim advocate program at the Reno Police Department, and there's information and applications available on our website, and I think we're going to put a link to that after the show. But one thing I would like to mention is the Washoe County Child Advocacy Center is run by our district attorney, Chris Hicks, in their office, and we're a partner of that, as is Sparks PD, Washoe County Sheriff, and Child Protective Services. It's an amazing center, and we're having an open house on April 28th for the community to come out and see it. We're trying to raise funds to establish a healing garden for the children that are served there. And all children in Washoe County that are sexually abused and physically abused are examined there and are interviewed there. And it's an amazing fairly new. It opened in June of 2014. So I would love, if anybody's interested, they could contact my office, and we'll provide information to both the fundraiser and the event.
Okay, Lori, we're out of time, but thank you so much.
Thank
I really
you.
do appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we will get all that information up on our website. That is it for this episode of Face the State, but for more information on all of that, once again, just head to ktvn.com. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you next week.